Start. ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने श्रीचैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथामृतं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। सर्वशास्त्रविपीयूष सर्ववैदिक सत्फल सर्वसिद्धांत रत्नाद्य सर्वलोकैक दृक्पद सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवतो प्रभु कलिद्वंतोतितादित्य श्रीकृष्ण परिवर्तिता परमानंद पाठाय प्रेम वर्ष अक्षराय ते सर्वद सर्वसेवाय श्रीकृष्णाय नमोस्तुते मद एक बंधु मद संगेन मद गुरु मद महाधन मन निष्ठार्क मद भाग्य मद आनंद नमोस्तुते असाधु साधु तादाइन अति नीचो च ताकर हाना मुंचा कदाचिन्मा प्रेम न हृत्कंठयो स्फुरः। ओम नारायण नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी श्रीमतां स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्य श्रवण कीर्तनम हृदयन्तस्त्व भद्राणि विदुनोति सुहृत् सतां ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवताम की जय। Okay, Hare Krishna. So thank you for joining. So let's get started. We are in Canto 2 and the last chapter of Canto 2, chapter 10. So I'm just going to review the first section of this chapter, which actually talks about the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then we'll continue from text number 8. So we discuss up to text number 7. So we'll continue text number 8. So these 10 topics, these are the characteristics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we have discussed that how these 10 topics actually differentiate Srimad Bhagavatam from other kinds of Puranas, right? And we mentioned that, there are other Puranas which focus more on the 5 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or even if, like if you consider Vishnu Purana, it may go into 10 topics, but 10 topics are not elaborately explained. It's only in the Srimad Bhagavatam that all these 10 topics have been elaborately explained, and that actually makes Srimad Bhagavatam the Mahapurana, or the highest of all the Puranas. So what are 10 topics? We started with Atra. So Atra, basically referring that first verse of this chapter, as we say, Atra. Atra means in this Srimad Bhagavatam. What is that? Sarga. So Sarga is the first topic. So I'm going to quickly review through these 10 topics because it's so important. And so what are 10 topics? So you have Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, Uthaya, Manvantara, Ishan Kata, Nirodha, Mukti, Ashraya. right? So these are the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and and the text 2 of this chapter is actually say Dashamasya Vishuddha Artham. They actually say all the 10 topics here, which are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. What is the purpose? The purpose of all these topics is to finally isolate the transcendence of the Samambhuna. So all the 10 topics are finally to bring one to the point of the Ashraya, which is the 10th topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? So even if you are reading something about the creation or the sub-creation, and one may say, what has this got to do finally with the qualities and activities of Supreme Personality of Godhead? But the point here is, in the second verse, it actually said, either by Shrutena, Arthena, or Agyasa, either by Vedic evidences, inference, or by direct explanation, or by summary explanation. All the great sages and devotees like Vidura and Maitreya, they are explaining all these topics to bring one to the final shelter, the ultimate shelter of everyone, who is the Samambonam Lord Sri Krishna. So entire Srimad Bhagavatam is bringing us to the point of taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of God. And also it makes the point that, for whatever the heavenly planets, and it says, yes, for the body, the shelter may be heavenly planets. But for the spirit soul, the Atma, the only shelter is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God. Right? Sharanam Sharanyam, and hence the Lord is actually known as Mukunda, is known as Sharana Sharanyam. Right? He is the one taking shelter of, he is the final shelter for all the jivas. Okay, so now let's go through Sarga. Sarga is the primary creation. So in Sarga, we read about from Karanadakshay Vishnu, how for the 5 gross elements, the senses, the mind, so totally the 16 elements are generated from the Mahavishnu, who is lying down on the Karana ocean. And today in this chapter, we actually discuss Sarga. So the major section of this chapter talks of Sarga, and then the last few verses will go into Visarga also. But Sarga, basically, how from Mahavishnu, all these elements are generated, and then it also goes into Tanmatras, the senses, the Mahat Tattva, and up to the universal form, the creation of the universal form. So all that is actually in the Sarga aspect. But what is Visarga? Visarga is a secondary creation. So in the secondary creation, what do we talk about? We talk about Brahmaji, the creation of Brahma, and how the 3 modes of material nature interact so that all the living entities get different forms of bodies, like 8.4 million species of life. All that comes in the Visarga aspect. So Sarga, Visarga, right? Then third aspect is what? Sthanam. Sthanam, or also the other word used is Stiti, right? Stitihi or Sthanam. Right? So Sthanam actually refers to, and particularly the word used there is Stitir Vaikunta Vijaya. Right? Stitir Vaikunta Vijaya. So what is the right stiti or situation for all living entities? Right? Is to actually come to the point of accepting Vaikunta Vijaya, the victory of the Lord of Vaikunta. Right? And basically the word Vijaya is actually used to actually indicate that all the jivas should finally come to the point of realizing that victory is over suffering, over miseries, can only be obtained by actually accepting Vaikuntanath, or the Lord of Vaikuntha. Right? So that is Sthiti or Sthanam, which is a right situation for all living entities. Then Poshanam. Poshanam means maintenance. How does the Lord maintain all living entities? Right? That is actually Tat Anugraha. Right? So when you actually remember the meaning, remember the next part of these words. Right? So for Sthiti or Sthanam, it is what? Vaikuntha Vijaya. Right? For the next one from Poshanam, it is what? Tat Anugraha. Right? So what is maintenance is actually happening only by the Anugraha or the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? That Anugraha. So that's his causeless mercy. Then Manvantara. Right? The Manvantara is Sadharma. So there are 14 Manus, right? In the day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus. 14 Manus. And then the main thing there is Sadharma. So Prabhupada actually in the purport, he explained the point that we are all like, forgetful of our relationship with Krishna. And hence we actually consider this world to be all in all. right? But this Sadharma or the scriptures which are actually given by the Manus are actually to wake us up to our real position, right? And hence the Manvantara is actually associated with the word Sadharma to indicate what is the perfect occupational duty for every living entity. And this is actually given in the Manu Samhita, right? Okay, so that is Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, and the Manvantara. So 5, right? The next topic, Uti. Uti means what is the impetus for activity, right? And what is the words associated with the Karma Vasana, right? Why are the conditioned living entities working in this material world? What is the fruitive desire of all living entities to perform work? That is Uti, or the creative impetus, right? Okay. And then Uti, so that is topic number 6. Then 7 is what? Ishanukata. Ishanukata is the science of Godhead, right? And in Ishanukata is actually explained what are topics in Ishanukata, the incarnations of the God, right? And his devotees. So both, even studying the life of the devotees is actually comes under the topic of Ishanukata. So that's sense of God. The next one is Nirodha. Nirodha is winding up. What does this mean, winding up? That actually means when all the living entities in this material world, if they do not use this lifetime to actually hear the transcendental words from the Vedas, from the devotees of the Lord, and they don't make use of this life to actually go back home, back to God, then what will happen? When there is winding up, all these living entities will actually enter into the body of Mahavishnu. So that is the Nirodha, the winding up. Right? And then the next topic is liberation, Mukti. Muktir hitvan yatha rupam swarupena vyavastiti. So if you see Prabhupada often in lecture, how does he define Mukti? He quotes this line of this verse, right? Mukti or liberation means swarupena vyavastiti, right? To actually be situated in our original constitutional position, which is actually a spiritual existence in relationship to Krishna. That is real mukti or liberation, right? So permanent situation of the living entity, right? So that is the mukti. And the last topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam is ashraya or shelter. So all the 9 topics is to bring one to the point of ashraya. The supreme shelter of everyone is Sasamam Bonam Lord Sri Krishna. So that is ashraya. So these are the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Right, so this should be like we should know this by heart, all these 10 topics, and we should be able to explain what these 10 topics are. So that's up to text 7. So we covered this. Now we'll continue with text number 8 onwards. Right? So the next two verses, 8 and 9, is actually proving how uh, the supreme shelter, Paramatma, or you call him the absolute truth, or you call him by different names, but that absolute truth is the ultimate shelter for all jivas. So that is explained in text 8 and 9. Okay. Is there any comments or realization or questions up to this point before we continue?
I have one question for the Nirodha.
Nirodha, yes.
This verse it says going back to Godhead, and then here it says winding up. So
yeah. So actually, it is more Nirodha is actually referring to the aspect of going back. Is actually referring to the aspect of winding up. So if you see in that purport, in that verse purport, Prabhupada talks of both the aspects. One is the aspect of those jivas who do not perfect their life. They enter into what? Godhead, in the way they enter into the body of Mahavishnu. And those who actually perfect their life, they actually go beyond Mahavishnu into the Vaikuntha. So both of those aspects is one way you're connecting either with Mahavishnu or you're actually going beyond into the body. So both actually aspects going back to Godhead, right? So that back to Godhead does not necessarily refer to entering into the Vaikuntha planets, but it's actually referring to entering into the body of Mahavishnu. Okay, anything else? Okay, all 10 topics good? Right? Okay. Okay, So let's continue. Text number 8.
Yodhyatmiko yam purusha sosak evadidaivikah yastatro bhaya vicheda purusho yadi bhautikaha. Hare Krishna. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adhidevik. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adhibhotik person. Hare Krishna.
What are we trying to understand here? That how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate shelter. And how is this explained? By differentiating all other living entities with that one Supreme entity. Right? So when you talk of all the other living entities, what are the three other kinds of living entities? There's the Adhyatmic, the Adhibhotik, and the Adhidaivik. Right? So other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, these are the three living entities. And if we can prove that these three living entities are all interdependent and they are dependent on that one individual, then we have proved our case that the one individual is the shelter of all the living entities. Right? Everyone with me? Okay. Okay. So let's see. What is Adhyatmic? Okay, so here it is actually said the individual person possessing different instruments of the senses. Right? So one who possesses the sense organs, or this is actually the controlled living entity. So okay, I'll explain all the three and then I'll come back. So Adhyatmic is actually here referring to the person possessing the sense organs is Adhyatmic. Adi Devik is the controlling deity. Like we'll study later on in this chapter that how even if you have to blink the eye, there is a demigod who's controlling our blinking of the eye. It's almost inconceivable. Like every time I blink, a demigod is actually doing something. A demigod is controlling every moment of a sense organ, right? So that controlling deity is actually Adi Devik person. And then what is Adi Bhautik? Adi Bhautik is this visible body, right? This visible body is actually the Adi Bhautik. So the Adi Bhautik could be the visible body of the control living entity or the controller living entity. Who is the control living entity? That's us. Controller. Control living entity is us, and the controller living entity is the demigods, because the demigods are actually controlling our different senses. Right? So basically, other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, these are the three other kinds of living entities. Okay.
Sorry, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, the Adi Bhautik is the visible body of both the controlled and the controlling deity?
Visible body of the, yes, embodied living entity. So that's what this Prabhupada is actually making the point in the purport. And he gives an example. He gives a very nice example. He says a person who is working in like the food department, right? He himself is actually made of what? The same food. So though he's controlling, okay, this fruit has to go here, or these vegetables, this is how it's produced, but he himself is actually made of the same food. So similarly, the controller living entity is also made out of the same elements that he himself is controlling. So that way they are Adhibhotik is both. Okay. So
what's Adhyatmika again?
Adhyatmik. So see, this will become later when we actually become more clear later when we actually come to the section where it talks about these three aspects of Adhyatmik, Adhibhotik, and Adhidevik. So Prabhupada is giving one example, one understanding of this. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives slightly different understanding of these three aspects. Okay, so that is a slight difference, and we'll see this in the further section also. But you can consider here the in terms of Prabhupada's explanation, the Adhyatmic to actually refer to the gross sense organ. That means what? It actually refers to the ear, skin, eyes, tongue, touch, all those. Right? Then, if you consider Adi Devik both Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Prabhupada have the same explanation, that there is a demigod who is controlling this. So, if you consider the ears, or let's consider the eyes, right? Who is the demigod controlling the eyes? Surya, right? So, Surya is the Adi Devik. Now, what is Adi Bhautik? Is the person, the whole person who is actually experiencing the function of the movement of the eyes, or the hearing, or the smelling, etc. Right? So Adi Bhautik there could actually refer to all the gross sense organs. So yeah. So yeah, okay. I'll make the difference here. So Prabhupada, how he explains is, he says Adi Bhautik is actually the eyes and also the subtle sense organ, which is the eyesight or the seeing, right? So when we say the eyes and the sight, both of them are Adi Bhautik. Right? So there's a gross sense organ and the subtle sense organ. Both of them come in Adi Bhautik. Sorry, Adhyatmik. Adi Devik controlling Deity, that's clear. Adi Bhautik is the entire person experiencing this. Right? Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he actually says that the Adhyatmik is the gross sense organ, Adi Bhautik is the subtle sense organ, and Adi Devik is the controlling Deity. Adhyatmik is the, oh, sorry, what did I say? Okay, sorry, repeat. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he actually said Adhyatmik is a subtle sense organ, Adi Devik is presiding Deity, and Adi Bhautik is a gross sense organ. Is everyone confused? Enough? No?
How are these related to the three miseries that we talk about? Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik miseries, and Adhyatmik.
Yeah, so let's say Adi Devik is clear, right? So even when you talk about miseries which are coming from the nature, so that is demigods, right? So that is it. Right? Adhyatmik is what miseries that's coming from our own body and mind, right? So that is actually similarly here how Prabhupada actually uses Adhyatmik to explain what? The gross and the subtle sense organ. So it is both the mind and the body. Right? Now, Adi Bhautik is that actually coming from other living entities. So when we actually consider the entire living entity as as an element, that is Adi Bhautik. So in miseries, if you get miseries from other living entities, that is the Adi Bhautik aspect. So when you are considering the entire body as an element, that is Adi Bhautik. So you can draw the correlation there. So basically, see, Adi Devik is clear, right? No question on that, controlling Deity. The only difference with how Prabhupada explains and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains is Prabhupada says Adhyatmik, he actually says to both gross and subtle sense organ, and Adi Bhautik would actually refer to the whole, the embodied living entity. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying Adhyatmik is the subtle sense organ, and Adi Bhautik is the gross sense organ. Okay. So it's okay, everyone? Okay. So now let's come to the theme of this verse. What is the theme of this verse? Either we are talking of, see, basically what are we referring to? Gross sense organ, subtle sense organ, and the embodied living entity. And okay, so gross sense organ, subtle sense organ, the embodied living entity, and the right. Okay, let's stick with these three. Okay, gross sense organ, subtle sense organ, and embodied living entity. Now, the embodied living entity, either it is controlled living entity or controller living entity. Right? So these are all the living entities are actually, all the entities are divided into these three categories. Now, first point that Prabhupada actually makes in the purport is actually says that how the supreme controller, Samam Bonam, is actually the Paramatma or the super soul. So if you see here, it actually, okay, so it will come later. So basically in the next verse, it actually refers to this shelter as oh yeah, in text number 7, sorry, in text number 7, it actually refers to shelter as who? Paramatma. So Prabhupada is actually making the point. If you see in text 7, it actually says Sa Ashray Param Brahma Paramatmeti Shabdayate. So that Ashraya or the Samam Bonam is referred to as Paramatma, the super soul, or sometimes by the depending on the person worshipping, it could also refer to as Param Brahma or the supreme, right? So Paramatma. So Prabhupada actually explains how the Paramatma is actually a manifestation of the supreme controlling the Samam Bonam. And he quotes Bhagavad Gita 10:42, Athava bhavne tena kim gyatena tavajana vistabhyaham idam krishnam ekam sino stito jagat. He says basically by what need is that Arjun for all these detailed knowledge with a single fragment of myself I pervade and support this entire universe. So that is referring to what? The Paramatma aspect of the Lord. Right? So one way Prabhupada is saying that Samam Bonam or the Paramatma, they are the same ultimate personality, they are the ultimate shelter. Now, this Paramatma, right? So Prabhupada said that if you consider the controlling deities, whether that's Vishnu, Brahma, or Shiva, they are all different manifestations of this Paramatma feature, right? But still, there is a difference between the controller demigods and the controlled living entities. Okay, but even the control living entity and control demigods. So even the controller, right, all the demigods, they are also jivas. Okay. So, and Prabhupada says the senses are controlled by the deities, controlling deities, and okay. So basically, Prabhupada is making the point that both the control and the controller living entity, both of them are under the control of the Paramatma. So if you see the point, so all our senses are controlled by the demigods. Demigods are controlled by whom? Krishna himself, right? So both of them are finally controlled by the Paramatma feature. So that point is there. Now the other point here is what differentiates between a demigod and a living entity? What is the difference there? The only difference is based on the fruitive activities of the living entity. If a living entity does a lot of pious activities, then what happens? He's promoted to become a demigod. So it is only based on the activities of the jiva that one can be either a controlled or a controller living entity. But both of them are actually, in terms of their identity, they are that way, both are controlled by the Paramatma. And Prabhupada gives another point here. He says the material body, all right, this entire Adi Bhautik Purusha is actually controlled by what? Anna Rasa embodiment. That means what? The entire body is dependent on food. Now, if you see the spirit soul, does the spirit soul eat food? No, the spirit soul is completely spiritual. It doesn't need anything for its sustenance. It is only the body, the material body, that actually requires food for its nourishment. And that is actually true for us and also the demigods. So only the difference between the bodies of the controlled and the controller living entities is to do with this Anna Rasamaya body. The soul as such does not eat. So the whole point of this purport is to prove that how the demigods and the living entities are both one way in the same category, and both of them are dependent on the Paramatma. Okay? Everyone okay? Any questions?
You said,
Sorry, Prabhuji, go ahead.
you said food is consumed by living entities, and the soul doesn't consume food. But we're talking about controlled living entity, which is demigod.
For both, right?
Uh-huh.
So Prabhupada is making the point that both the bodies of the control and the controller living entity is dependent on some kind of nourishment, annamaya. Right? Even the demigods, they need something to sustain. Even their bodies are better than our bodies, but still they need that sustenance.
Right.
So Prabhupada is saying the difference between the bodies of the living entities and the living entity and the body of the demigods is the kind of Annamaya, but both of them are dependent on the Annamaya.
And the differentiation is between the living entities, either is demigods or the living entities versus the Supreme Lord. Is that the point of differentiation here?
No, right here we are just right here we are just talking of the control and the controller living entities. Here, controller is referring to a demigod. We have not come to the point of Paramatma because that's the next verse.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So here we are just talking of all the jivas, conditioned jivas, whether that's demigod or living entity, all the conditioned jivas. Vijay,
Sorry, Prabhuji, my question is off topic. Before going ahead, I wanted to clear the difference between Nirodha and Mukti. In word-to-word translation, Nirodha says going back home, back to Godhead, and Mukti says liberation. So is it Mukti winding up or Nirodha winding up?
Nirodha is actually the winding up. You see the
Word-to-word translation says going back to Godhead.
yeah, that's the point I explained to Ratnaradhika. Right? Nirodha means winding up means what? When the living entities, after like when Brahma, he lives for 100 years, then what happens? If the jiva has not perfected his consciousness, then what happens? Then the jiva, he actually gets absorbed into the body of Mahavishnu. And Mahavishnu, one way you can say, is going back to Godhead. But it is after that, jiva has to come back when Mahavishnu wakes up. So it is not the ultimate shelter. The ultimate shelter comes in the ashram.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Anything else? Is okay? Yeah.
Prabhu, could you please explain that in the purport? Prabhupada is saying about the Purusha use in both, like we know Purusha is like controller. So even the controlled jivas are called Purusha and Adibhautika Purusha. So how do we, because Purusha Prabhupada means by, so means like this living entity, because Prabhupada says Adibhautika to be the gross, subtle, right? Oh, both subtle and gross senses. Adhyatmika. Oh my God.
Adhyatmika. But the point here, if you see in that paragraph, Prabhupada said, that which distinguishes the controller and the control, that is the material body, is called the Adi Bhautik Purusha. So Purusha, Prabhupada is referring, the body itself, because it's an individual, is called, the body is sometimes called Purusha. So basically referring to that
Adibhautika.
Adibhautika, thank you. Adibhautika, that is actually referring to the Purusha, the body. Right? And the difference between the body of the living entities as us and the demigods is in the Anna Rasa
Samaya body.
Anna Rasa Maya body. Okay, let's do the next verse, and then these two verses will complete the theme, and then we'll come back and revisit if there are any questions. So text number 9.
Ekam ekatara bhave yada no palabhamahe tritayam tatra yo veda sa atma svashrayashrayaha. Vijay Radhika Mataji, would you like to read?
Mataji, I'm not well. I'm just listening.
All three of the above-mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter.
Right. So what is our main point? We are trying to prove that how Paramatma is the shelter of all the living entities. So here, if you see Ekam Eka Tara Bhave, that means what? All these three, Adhyatmic, Adibhautik, or Adidevic, they are all interdependent on each other. What does that mean? That in the absence of one, the other two do not have any meaning. Let's take an example. If you say the sun, right? The sun is the controlling deity of the eyes. We already made that point. Then further it's elaborated also. But if a person does not have eyes, is there any meaning to sun? No. Right? If there's no eyes, if there's sunlight or no sunlight, there's no meaning. Right? So the eye, if there's no eyes, then certainly there's no meaning to the sun. Then second aspect, if there is no sight, which is subtle. So eyes is the gross, and sight would be a subtle sense organ. If there is no sight, then again no meaning to the sun, right? Now, if there is no sun, is there any meaning to the eyes and the sight? No. In darkness, the eyes and sight are there, but they're not functioning. So the main point here is all these three aspects, right? Whether Adhyatmic, Adhibautik, or Adidevik, they are all dependent on each other. They are interdependent. Each one of them has no meaning if the other two are not present. Right? So that says, so that's why it says Yada na upalabhame. So that basically means is not perceivable. So all these three, the about three stages of the different living entities, cannot be understood in the absence of another, right? And hence it's not perceptible if any one of these three are absent, right? But then it says Tritayam Tatro Yav Veda. But beyond these three interdependent living entities or different elements, Sa Atma, and the main word here is Swa Ashraya Shraya. Right? Beyond these three is that one living entity who is Swa means what? Own, shelter of the shelter. Beyond these three, there is one who is his own shelter. That is Paramatma. There is no other shelter to Paramatma. He is the ultimate shelter. Right? So if you consider that these three are dependent on each other, now we say they are interdependent, but who has created that interdependence? See, as soon as someone has designed the system and say, okay, that is this machine, and this machine can work only when there is battery. If there is no battery, the machine is useless. Right? But if the battery is separate, then there's no function to the battery. So battery and that machine, or if you take an amplifier or whatever, has to be together. They are interdependent. But that means there is someone beyond that who's created the machine and the battery, that only when they are together, there is meaning to it. And that independent, supreme shelter of all shelters is the Paramatma. So beyond these three, Adhyatmic, Adhibautik, and Adidevik Purusha is actually the Parama Purusha, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this actually proves that how Paramatma is actually the Ashraya of everyone. The Adhibautik, the Adidevik, and the Adhyatmic Purushas. Okay. Right. So Prabhupada in the purport, he gives the example of the sun. The sun controls the power of a vision. We can see the sun because there's eyes and the sunshine. And without sun, the eyes and the sight have no meaning. And without eyes, there's no meaning to the sun or the sight. Hence, they are actually interdependent. You cannot define one without the presence of the others. So hence, the ultimate source of all this interdependence is the supreme truth, or Paramatma, or the super soul. And hence he is known as Swa Ashraya Shraya. And right. Also, Prabhupada actually he quotes, if you see in the Bhagavad Gita, so there's Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita in the 10th chapter, but then there's 3 Shloki Bhagavad Gita in the 15th chapter, right? 15.16, 17, 18. Right? So basically there, what does it actually say? That yes, there are Shara and Akshara. There are two kinds of living entities, the fallible and the infallible. But beyond these, there is who? There is Paramatma, who is the controller of both. So same point is actually explained here. So even in 15th chapter, so Prabhupada quotes at 15:18, Yasma Sharam Atitoham Akshara Api Chotama Atosmi Loke Vedecha Pratita Purushottama. Because I am the Purushottama, I am transcendental both to the Shara and the Akshara, and because I am the greatest, hence I am actually worshipped by all. Right? I am the supreme person in the Vedas. Okay, and hence that Lord is the shelter of all living entities. Okay. Okay, so these are the two verses which are actually given to prove that how the Lord is the final Ashraya. The 10th topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the final Ashraya, the subject matter of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So when we are reading the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, we should remember this, that finally we want to come to the point. Every section of the Bhagavatam is to bring us to the point of taking shelter of that Samam Bodhi, Supreme Personality of God. Right? And Prabhupada in the purport to text number 7, we discussed last time, he says like how in the Srimad Bhagavatam, if you follow in the first canto, right, when there's a question answers in chapter 1, 2, and 3, right, question answers by Suta Goswami and Shonakadi Rishi, right? In that, what did we read? What is the ultimate good for all, right? And what is the ultimate dharma, right? Savai pumsa paro dharma yato bhaktir adhokshaje. Direct is clearly said that bhakti to adhokshaje. He is the essence, right? And then finally we see, then further if you see in Prabhupada says in the fourth and then third chapter, which is the verse that actually establishes Krishna as a supreme. Krishna to Bhagavan Swayam. So very clear. Then in the fourth chapter, we see that how when there's conversation between Vyasadeva and Narad Muni, again Vyasadeva has compiled all the different shastras, but still he is not satisfied. Why? Because he is not spoken about devotional service to Krishna. So again, that also proves the point. And then further Prabhupada says, even if you come to the second canto, in the first chapter itself, when Sukadeva Goswami answers Maharaj Parikshit's question, that what is the duty of everyone, particularly one who's going to die, then clearly Sukadeva Goswami says one should hear about, chant, and remember that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So very clearly given. Further in the second canto, chapters 4, 5, and 6, when Narad Muni is actually asking Brahmaji that who is the ultimate shelter, and the 6 questions, right? 6 questions. What is the answer finally? He said Vasudeva Paragati, Vasudeva, it is Krishna himself. So again and again, we see that truth up to this point in Srimad Bhagavatam, again and again, we see that how Lord Shri Krishna is established as the Ashraya. And further, we'll read further in third canto and then going on. And if you see in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, how many chapters are there? In the entire Srimad Bhagavatam? How many shlokas we know? 18,000, right? How many chapters are there in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam? So it is 326, I think. Yeah. So 326 chapters in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Out of that, 90 chapters of the 10th canto, plus 31 chapters of the 11th canto, exclusively talking about Lord Shri Krishna, the ultimate shelter. So if you see 90 plus 30, 121 chapters of the 326 is actually exclusive about Lord Shri Krishna. And hence Lord Shri Krishna is the ultimate shelter. The goal of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is to bring us to the shelter of that Supreme Personality of God. Okay, so that is text number 8 and 9. Okay, so is that okay? And we'll come back to that because further in this chapter, again, we'll talk of Adhyatmic, Adibhautik, and Adidevik. Yeah.
So, the verse Sa Atma, as Prabhupada explains, as the super soul. Could it be also be thought as the Atma, like individual living entities? Because all that we read, Adhyatma, Adibhautika, it is not talking about the Atma, which is like Swa Atma. I mean, Prabhupada is saying here is Paramatma, but even all these three are dysfunctional when the Atma is not there.
Okay, so that point is accepted that all these three, the sun, the sight, and the eyes, they are not functional unless there is the Atma beyond it. But the point of this verse is actually to prove that the shelter of that Atma is actually Paramatma. So hence that Swa Ashray can only refer to Paramatma because even for the Atma, the shelter is who? Not the Atma itself. But the Atma, the shelter is who? Not Swa Ashray. only for Paramatma. So Atma also shelter is Paramatma. So only Paramatma can actually be said to be Swa Ashraya, his own shelter. But the point is, yes, Atma, all these three cannot function without Atma, but the shelter of Atma is Paramatma. Okay. Okay. Are we good? Text 10. Okay. So up to this point, text 9, these first 9 verses is actually talking about the 10 characteristics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And why are we reading these 10 characteristics? Because in the previous chapter, when we concluded the Chatushloki Bhagavatam, then he actually said that it referred to the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and basically how Narad Muni is going to elaborate further on these 10 topics. And basically, hence, this chapter talks about the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so that's the first section done. Now we move on to the second section. Now, what is the first topic of the 10? Is Sarga. So now we'll read about Sarga. So text number 10 all the way to text number 35 is talking of Sarga. And then the last few verses, 36 to 47, talks of the Visarga aspect. So Sarga and Visarga. These two are explained here. And then this chapter ends with Parikshit Maharaj. Actually, no, sorry. Suta Goswami asking about Vidura and Maitreya's conversation, and that leads unto Canto 3. Okay, so we move on to text number 10, Sarga aspect.
Purushodam vinirbhindya yadaso sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan aposhrakshik chuchi shuchihi.
After separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha Avatara, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodoka.
Okay, so can someone explain what is the Sarga aspect? We just discussed, right?
Creating the 16 elements.
Okay, from?
From the body of the Lord, we read in
Mahavishnu.
The limbs
Mahavishnu.
of the body.
Body of Mahavishnu.
Mahavishnu, the limbs of
How the 16 elements are created, right? Up to the point of creation of Brahma, or even Garbhodaksha Vishnu creation, all that is in the Sarga aspect. Now, before going into the explanation of Sarga, Prabhupada in this purport and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary actually put forward this question. Why do we always speak about the universal form and the self? Why not speak about the sweet discussion about the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What is the answer to this? So the entire actually Prabhupada's purport is just answering this question based on Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also elaborates on this answer. Because till now, how many times we have talked about the Virat Purusha? Even in this canto, twice we have already talked about Virat Purusha. Right? Now again, we are going to talk of universal form. Why are we again talking of universal form again and again and again? Why not jump to the sweet pastimes of Krishna? And actually, in the third canto, we will start off with the sweet pastimes of Krishna. But why is this theme repeating again and again? And we have already made the point that how Srimad Bhagavatam is actually the Mahapurana. It has all these 10 characteristics, bringing one to the Ashraya. So why not directly talk about the Ashraya? So that's been answered in this purport. So what's the answer to this? Anyone like to share any thoughts?
Because we cannot appreciate the pastimes of the Lord unless we understand his opulence.
Okay, very nice. So that we discussed this point that unless we actually understand the greatness of the Lord, we cannot appreciate the sweetness of the Lord. So first point actually Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is actually making is one who is qualified to relish the higher topics of Krishna's pastimes. Only those who have perfected their bhakti, or those who are advanced devotees. Otherwise, the neophytes, they will actually just misunderstand. Oh, why did Krishna marry 16,108 queens? Isn't that immoral? They will actually put forward such questions. So these topics are actually meant for the advanced souls. So hence, you have to be qualified to relish the higher topics. That's the first point. Second point is the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is actually a crest jewel of all the Puranas. Now, what is as Krishna is the most merciful, similarly, the Srimad Bhagavatam is most merciful. That means what? That Srimad Bhagavatam is actually giving instruction to make even those jivas who are actually sleeping in this material world, he wants to wake them up by wake them up and engage them into sadhana bhakti by speaking about topics related to Maya. So that is actually one verse we discussed this earlier. It comes in the 7th chapter to 753, where it actually says that if the jiva constantly describes Maya in relation to the Lord, remembers Maya or hears about Maya with proper faith, he will not be bewildered by Maya. Right? So basically the point here is actually made because most of the living entities are under the grasp of the Maya. They are sleeping in the lap of the witch called Maya. Then how do you wake them up? By speaking of Maya in relationship to Krishna. And when we talk of Maya in relationship to Krishna, it is basically the aspect of the Lord in terms of the creation. So because Bhagavatam being the most merciful, it is by some trick or other, it wants to wake up all the living entities to actually enable them to come to the stage of engaging in sadhana bhakti. Right? And then, so basically Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives two examples, and he actually says that how, okay, the jivas are in Maya, but they can be woken up by speaking of topics of Maya in relationship to Krishna, that is his creation. And he gives two examples. Just like when a limb is burned by fire, maybe someone knows this. When a limb is burned by fire, the treatment is also given relief by fire. Do you know this? It is actually some Ayurvedic treatment that when there is fire, they actually take, I think it is like turmeric burnt in fire, and they actually put that onto the skin. So though the skin is burned, but you're actually applying something hot just to clean the, to treat that burn. So similarly, those who are in Maya are treated by topics of Maya. Right? So hence Bhagavatam is again and again talking about the universal. And the other example, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, if a person is haunted by ghosts, then there may be some ghost mantras to cure that person of the ghost. So similarly, a person is covered by Maya, so you speak about topics related to Maya. In terms of Lord's Maya, in terms of Lord's creation, and by that person, the person will wake up. So what does this actually mean? That those who are deep in the influence of Maya, when they hear pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna, like how we have that little Krishna DVD, so many people watch it. But does that create that transformation in the heart? Not necessarily. People say, "Oh, nice cartoon, fun," But they need something which is actually waking them up and saying, oh, this is the aspect of how the Lord creates, and this is the nature of the living entities here in this material world. Basically, Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, Uti, all these topics. And when the living entity realizes, oh, why am I sleeping here? This entire material world is actually just like a dream. I need to wake up. And then when those topics come and Jiva wakes up, engages in sadhana bhakti, then he is actually qualified to hear a little bit about the pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. And then as he progresses, then he can go into deeper topics of the pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. Okay, so this is the second point, that this is the merciful nature of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that it is actually again and again talking about these topics. Okay. Then the third point is that those who are faithful devotees, they relish every section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the proof is that if you are saying, oh, this section is too boring, Lord's creation, who wants to talk about that? Universal form again and again and again. That means we are actually not at that level where we are relishing every section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? What was the 1.1.3?
Nigamakalpataro.
And what is the point? It is just a ripened mango fruit. Anywhere you bite it, it is just dripping with nectar. So similarly, the Bhagavatam, anywhere you actually, any section you read, it is full of nectar. Right? So by again and again, the Bhagavatam stressing on this universal form, it is actually creating that taste in the jiva, where the jiva can actually relish every section of the Bhagavatam. Okay. And then the fourth point here is Lord Shri Krishna is the sum total of all the incarnations, including the impersonal aspect of the Lord, the Brahman, the Paramatma. And Srimad Bhagavatam is who? Is Vishnu, Narayan? No. Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So as Krishna is the sum total of everything, includes the Brahman and Paramatma, hence Srimad Bhagavatam being the incarnation of direct Lord Shri Krishna, includes the explanation of Brahman, Paramatma, and so on. Right? So basically, even those people who are worshippers of Brahman and Paramatma are actually, by the mercy of Srimad Bhagavatam, elevated to pure devotion. And hence, Bhagavatam is actually talking again and again about Brahman, Paramatma, universal form, etc. Because all these worshippers, Bhagavatam is not like directly rejecting them, but actually having sympathy of on those worshippers to raise them to the platform of bhakti or devotional service. Point number 4. Okay. Clear? 4 points. So that's Prabhupada's purport, and that's Vishwanath Thakur's commentary on this verse. So basically, we haven't even touched what this verse is saying, but that is actually their commentary, because now we are going to again read about this aspect of creation. So before going, we should have this conviction that understanding why Srimad Bhagavatam is again talking about this. Now we'll come to the verse, right? So what does the verse say? So it says Purusha Andam. Andam means what? Like an egg or a universe. Right? So Purusha Andam, so the Supreme Person, Vinir Vidya. So what does the Lord first do? The Mahavishnu or the Karanakshay Vishnu, he actually separates the material universes. Right? He separates the material universes. And then Yada, when Asau, the same, Vinirgata came out, Ayanam lying in place, Anvicham desiring. Okay, what? Okay. So basically here, after separating different universes, then this Mahavishnu, then who came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance of the first Purusha avatar, entered into each one of the separate universes, desiring to lie down, and then he actually created the water. So if you see in this verse, the last line says Apaha, Apaha referring to water, and Ashakrish, Ashashit, created Suchihi Suchihi. Suchihi Suchihi. Why Suchihi Suchihi? That's okay. So what is the point? Then Mahavishnu, he is actually separated the universes. Then he's actually entered into each one of the universes. But once he enters, what does he want to do? He wants to sleep. So when he wants to sleep, he actually creates water from his own body. And because the Lord is transcendental, even the water or the Garbhodak ocean is actually Suchihi. It is actually transcendental. So the Lord lies down on the transcendental waters of the Garbhodak ocean. Okay, so that is this verse. Clear? Any points on this verse? And we'll again elaborate into this whole sequence of creation, but it'll come in the next verse. Okay, let's proceed. Text 11.
Tasva vatsitsva srishtasu sahasram parivatsaran tena narayano nama yad apa purushodbhavaha. I think Koshalya. Oh, Karuna Mataji.
Yeah, it's my turn, right? Yeah, Hare Krishna. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That Supreme Person is not impersonal and therefore is distinctly another or person. Therefore, the transcendental water created from the Supreme Nara is known as Nara. And because he lies down on the water, he is known as Narayan. Hare Krishna.
So basically here, it actually says, Tasva avat sit swa shishtaso. So in the matter of creation, Sahasram for 1000 years, right? Tena Narayanaham. Okay, so basically, why is the Lord called Narayana? It actually explained in this word. Tena Narayano Nama Yad Apa Purushot Bhavaha. Right. So okay. So basically, the word used is Nara. Nara. So it is Nara and Nara with a stress on A, right? So the Nara actually refers to what? Nara refers to. Okay. So Nara, Nara. So A and A stress. That Nara refers to the waters which arise from Nara, Purusha, right? Which is actually Vishnu himself. And when he actually desires to rest, that resting place is known as Ayana. So he actually lies down in the water, Nara, and that is actually known as Narayana. Right? So when that Nara, that Purusha, is lying down, Ayana, on the water which is created from his body, which is Nara, then it's called Narayana. Right? And how long does he lie down? For 1000 years of his own measurement. So Narayana, the Lord enters, he desires to sleep, and for 1000 years of his own measurement, he is lying down on the Nara, and hence is known as Narayana. Okay, next verse.
Text 12. Dravyam karma cha kalascha swabhavo jiva eva cha yad anugrahata santi nasanti yad upekshaya.
One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time and modes, and the living entities who are meant to enjoy them all exist by his mercy only. And as soon as he does not care for them, everything becomes non-existent.
So why are we reading the section of the Sarga aspect? One point that Prabhupada repeatedly makes in the purport is actually to prove that how the Lord himself is Swa Ashraya. That means he is completely independent. So when we are reading this entire passage of how the Mahavishnu is separating the universes and he is desiring to enter into each one of them, then lying on the cross, he is completely independent. He does not have to do this. He is not dependent on anyone to do this. He is supremely independent. And hence, when he's doing this entire aspect of creation, it is his own Leela. It is his own pastime. When we are doing something, it's not our pastime. We are forced to do it. We are dependent on the demigods to do anything. But when the Lord performs all these activities, he is supremely independent. And hence, this entire aspect of Sarga is explained to prove this point. To prove this point. Okay, now in text 12, we say Dravyam, Karma, Kala, and Swabhava. So 4 things are there, right? Oh, actually, and then it talks of Jiva, right? So Dravyam means matter, Karma means the activity, right? Karma, action. Kalaha, time, Swabhava means the modes of material nature. All these, right? Yat Anugraha, Anugraha means mercy, right? Yat Anugraha, Shanti, Na Shanti, right? So na shanti yat upeksha. So all these, the dravyam, karma, kala, swabhava, and the jiva, right? Because the jiva is trying to enjoy dravya, karma, kala, and swabhava. Right? The jiva is trying to enjoy all these 4 things. So all these 5 things can produce effects only when they are yat anugraha, or only by the mercy of the Lord. When the Lord is actually negligent, then none of these actually produce any effects. So this proves what? That all these five are actually dependent on that one Lord, which is actually Vishnu himself. Because without the Lord, all these five don't produce any effects. Okay. So as soon as yet upekshaya, where does this word come again? Upekshaya. Anyone knows? We have read this in one of the it'll come to me. But upekshaya means when the Lord neglects, then nothing. All of these do not produce any side effects. Okay, so Prabhupada in the purport, he actually says how the jivas, the living entities, they try to enjoy what? The matter. They try to enjoy karma. They try to enjoy kala, I want to enjoy my time, right? Swabhava, my nature, I want to enjoy that, right? And all this is because the jivas have the false desire to lord it over Prakriti. All these are different aspects of Prakriti, and because of desire, and the jiva has false desire to lord it over all this, hence he actually tries to enjoy everything. But the Lord is actually the supreme enjoyers, and the jivas are actually meant to assist with the Lord's enjoyment. So only under the influence of Maya do the living entity thinks that we are meant, think that we are the enjoyers, but we are actually not meant for such enjoyers. The jivas are never Purusha or factual enjoyers, but they are always meant to enjoy with the Lord. Right? So if you just remember this one line, one phrase, the jivas are meant to enjoy not as the Lord, but with the Lord. The jivas are meant to enjoy not as the Lord. We think that we are the Lord and we say that, oh, I am the Lord of all I survey. Right? And hence we want to enjoy Prakriti, Kal and all those things. But our nature is that of Anandmaya Bhyasa. We want to enjoy, but that enjoyment will be successful only we enjoy with the Lord, in the sense that we enjoy by serving the Lord. So that's the main point of the purport. Prabhupada focuses on this. And then he actually makes the point further that he says that, okay, so what does this prove? That this proves a point that if the jiva, we are Anandamaya Bhyasa. And how can we enjoy? We can enjoy only with the Lord. That means what? We are dependent on the Lord even for our enjoyment. Right? Now further, Prabhupada makes the point. When as by the laws of nature, the spirit of enjoyment, gradually it fades. That means what? That as we grow old or as we get realized, then the spirit of enjoyment will actually gradually fade. And then what does the jiva mean? The jiva says, okay, now this material world, there is no enjoyment. I just want to merge into the absolute. Then the jiva, when he actually, realizes that the enjoyment of this material world is false, then he actually wants to merge into the aspect of the Lord. But even this illusion of merging into Brahman can only be removed by the Lord. So in both cases, so if the jiva is trying to enjoy this material nature, even that enjoyment is truly formed when he's connected with the Lord. And if the jiva actually realizes that, oh, material world is no enjoyment, I want to merge into Brahman, he can get out of that enjoyment only by the mercy of the Lord. Hence, in all situations, the jiva is actually completely dependent on the anugrah or mercy of the Lord. Okay, and the last sentence Prabhupada says of this purport: the living entities are therefore completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and all their so-called enjoyments by scientific improvement are crushed into dust when the Lord desires. We are thinking that, yes, I'll make the scientific advancement and hence I'll be happy. But just the Lord desires, and all that scientific improvement is crushed into dust. Like previously, we read this example of that one scientist, right, from India, and he was flying to London to actually give an entire conference on his discovery on like nuclear. He was a nuclear physicist, and then what happened? Just before reaching London, his plane crashed and he left. So all that so-called enjoyment can be crushed into dust when the Lord desires. So we are completely dependent on the Lord for everything. The whole point here, that's the point Prabhupada is repeatedly making, that to think that we are independent is actually foolish. We are completely dependent on the Lord. And hence, the Lord is the ashraya of every one of us. Next verse, next 13.
Eko nanatvam anvicham yoga talpat samuditaha viryan hiranmayam devo mayaya vyasrijatrida.
The Lord, while lying on his bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue, through external energy out of his desire to manifest varieties of living entities from himself alone.
Okay. So here the entire, step by step is actually explained. So what is happening here? So this is actually when this entire section is being explained, Sukadev Goswami is answering one of the questions of Parikshit Maharaj in chapter number 8, right? Where Parikshit Maharaj is asking, how is the universal form created? Right? To answer that question in chapter number 8, then Sukadev Goswami is giving this entire explanation here. Right? So how did the universal form, the Samasti Virat Rupa, arise? Okay, so this verse is explaining. So what happens? So we talked about Nirodha aspect, right? So when the life of Brahma is over, then the living entities who are not purified, they enter into the body of Mahavishnu. Now, Mahavishnu, right? So all the living entities are there. Now he's sleeping in the mystic slumber. But when he wakes up and he has this desire to create, what happens? First of all, what does he do? At the time of creation, he desired variety. So if you see in this verse, it says, Nanatvam. Nanatvam means his varieties. So that one, Ekaha, that Mahavishnu, desiring Anvichan varieties, then what does he do? He wakes up from his mystic slumber, right? He's sleeping in that yoga talpa. He's sleeping in the mystic slumber. He wakes up, and then all the living entities, they actually, first of all, come out of his body. Right? All right, so he separated the jivas from himself. Then from his bed of yoga maya, like a yoga, he's sleeping. Having slept at a time of destruction, which actually represents the night time, the spiritual Purusha then rose up in the morning. So even the Lord, he actually wakes up in the morning at the time of creation. And then what happens? Then he creates the different elements, starting with the Mahat Tattva, which is actually created by his energy. And then he creates these elements, the universe with its different layers. And this is when it calls of here in this verse, it talks of Hiranya Mayam, right? The golden hue, right? Generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue through the external energy. This is referring to each of the universes covered by the different elements of the Mahat Tattva. So universes are created, they're shining brightly with golden color, right? So this is the great creation. Now, from this creation, the creation of the universal form, this actually measures 500 million yojanas. Right? Now, after this creation, then the Purusha, he enters into each universe. He fills half of the universe with water, and that's the aspect of Narayana, Nara referring to water there. And then he actually places placing the universal form within himself, he went to sleep on the Garbhodak ocean. After that, when he rose from his bed and manifested the totality of the universe, golden in color, in 3 forms. And what are these 3 forms? Adi Daivam, Adi Bhutam, and Adi Adhyatma. Okay. So, are you with me? Or yeah, okay. So we have come to the point that, okay, from Mahavishnu, the entire creation, and then Garbhodakshay Vishnu, how he's lying on the Garbhodak ocean, and then he goes to sleep. But then when he wakes up, then what happens? Then the 3 forms are actually created. which is Adi Devam, Adhyatma, and Adi Bhutam. So Adi Devam referring to the sense Devata, Adhyatmam referring to the subtle sense organ, and Adi Bhutam referring to the gross sense organ. Okay. Now, this Garbhodakshay Vishnu, then what happens? Then from the navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu, the lotus stem arises. And from the lotus stem, this lotus stem is actually represent the gross form of the universal form with the 14 planetary system. So 3 aspects are generated now, right? So this verse actually talks about Trida. If you see the last word in this verse, Trida, right? So what is the Trida? 3 aspects. One is the lotus stem from the body of Garbhodakshay Vishnu navel, and that is the universal form with the 14 planetary system. The second aspect is the subtle Hiranya Garbha, which is actually the totality of the jivas. And the third aspect is the 4-headed Brahma. Right? So basically here, there are 3 forms of Brahma. 3 forms of Brahma. So one form is that golden hue, which is the totality of all the jivas, right? The second is the lotus stem coming, which is the universal form. And third is the 4-headed Brahma. So these 3 aspects are generated from Garbhodakshay Vishnu. Okay. Is everyone okay, or Sunday morning and sleepy and cannot focus and everything is too much?
Prabhuji, what is the second one? The first one is the stamp of the lotus flower, universal form of all the planetary system, and third one is the 4-headed Brahma. Which is the second one?
The sum totality of all the jivas, which is the Hiranya Garbha, which is the golden hue. So what was the first one you said, Madhu?
Prabhuji, you said that the stamp of the lotus flower, which is the universal form where all the planetary systems are situated.
First one, yes.
Yeah.
Third one?
The 4-headed Brahma.
Yeah, 4-headed Brahma. And second one is the subtle Hiranya Garbha.
When we read on the second chapter, the creation, as there also we read that, how you've made the chart of Ahankara creates goodness, passion, Adhyatma, Adhivautika. And there also there was Garbhodakshay Vishnu create, Lord enters into the mixing happens. Garbhodakshay Vishnu, binding factor, then the Hiranya Garbha. Is this the same thing we are reading?
Yeah.
Same explanation.
If you remember the chart, we read how Karandakshay Vishnu, that starts from Karandakshay Vishnu, right?
Right.
So he actually glances, and through the glance, the jivas and Kala.
Yeah, Dravya Shakti and
that actually comes, and then the Ahankara in 3 modes, and then that actually goes to Adi Bhautik, Adi Devi, Adhyatma. So the same aspect we are reading. That is all Sarga, right?
all Sarga.
That's all Sarga. Yeah. Okay, so in the purport, Prabhupada talks about. Okay, so Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 9.7 and 9.7 and 8, where it says, Sarva Bhutani Konteya Prakriti Yanti Mamikam Kalpashraya Punasta Kalpado Vishrajamya Aham. Basically, here in 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says how at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enters into me, and in the beginning of the next millennium, then I actually create them again. So basically the same point, that how at the end of Brahma's life, everything enters in the Karadaksha Vishnu, and then in the beginning he actually creates them again. And this whole cosmic order is under me, under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again, and under his will, it is automatically annihilated. So all this is actually the independence of the Lord. The Lord is not dependent on anything, and that's how everything is functioning. Now, Prabhupada also, further in this purport, he talks about 3 aspects: Maha, Samasti, Samasti, and Vyasti. I'm sorry, so technical. This is a section. So, first one, Maha Samasti, right? So, this is actually referring to Karanadaksha Vishnu with the total energy and all the jivas together before creation, when the Lord exists as the Mahavishnu, that is Mahasamasti. When he actually expands himself further into all these universes with the living entities, that multi-total energy is known as Samasti. So Mahasamasti, Samasti, right? And then when this energy expands into Adhyatmic, Adibhotik, and Adidevik, that is called Vyasti. Okay. Everyone okay? Still with me? Okay.
Like how we say, right, Prabhu, Lord Balaram or Nityananda Prabhu is Mahasamasti Guru, and individual is like Vyasti Guru.
Vyasti Guru,
Right.
right. Very nice point. Yeah, that's a comparison. So Mahasamasti, Samasti is when actually all the universes are created, and then Vyasti is when it actually manifests as Adhyatmic, Adidevik, and Adibhotik. Now, one more point the Prabhupada says that this whole creation and creative energies, one way, are non-different and different simultaneously. Why? Because all the energies are coming from Mahavishnu. So one way the energy and the energetic are the same, because there's no meaning to the energy without the energetic. So they are same, but still each one of these energy have a different function, and hence they are different. So one way they are same because they have the same connection, but they are different because they function differently. So that is this text number 13. Okay. Text 14. Let's go ahead.
Adidaivam atadhyatmam adibhutam iti prabhu ataikam purusham viryam tridha bhidyat tatshinu.
Translation: just hear from me how the potency of his lordship divides one into the three, called the controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies, in the manner meant.
Okay. Where do we read Tatshrunu again? Bhagavad Gita.
I think first verse of chapter 7.
Yes, 7.1. So that also Krishna says, Tatshrunu, hear from me. Right. So here also we are hearing Tatshrunu, hear from me. And Sukadeva Goswami is telling Parikshit Maharaj that these three aspects, Adidevam, Adhyatmam, Adibhotam. So we talked about this, right? Adidevam is who? The controlling living entities, right? Adhyatmam is the controlled living entities, and Adibhutam is the material bodies. Right? So these three are Tashrunu. I'm going to explain how these three are actually coming, right? Particularly it uses the word Iti Prabhu, from the Lord, how these three energies are being manifested. I am going to explain this to you. Please listen. Okay. And then here, and also, when we talk of this, so we talked of three aspects of the Brahma, right? So those three aspects are different from the three aspects of Adi Deva, Adi Bhuta, and Adhyatma. Don't get confused. That is three different manifestations from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and these are three different aspects of the potency manifested into three. Okay. Okay. Text 15.
Anta sharira akshashat purushasya vichetasaha vicheshtataha ojasaho balam yagye tata prano mahanasuho. Vijay Mataji.
From the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, sense energy, mental force, and bodily strength are all generated, as well as the sum total of the fountainhead of the total living force.
Right. So we read that how Mahavishnu, he had all the living entities were separated, and then the Mahat Tattva, right, was created. And from the Mahat Tattva, the universal shell consisting of earth, water, fire, air, ether, all the layers are created. Now further, after this creation, you also need the energy, the strength to actually continue the creation. So three aspects are generated first, and then the fourth aspect. So what are the three aspects? Ojaha, Saha, and Balam. Ojaha means the energy of the senses, Saha means the mental force, and Balam means the bodily strength. So body, mind, and energy. So energy of the senses, the mental force, and the bodily strength. These three are generated. And after Tataha, right? Tataha, thereafter what? The Pranaha, the living force, which is the fountainhead of Mahan Asuha. That means the fountainhead is of everyone's life. That's actually generated. See, if we have senses, right? If the eyes are very weak, can you see? No, you cannot see. So you need the ojaha, the energy of the sense, right? Even if you have good eyes, but if there's no desire to see, then you will not see. So saha is the mental force, right? Plus you need the bodily strength to actually nourish the eyes to continuously see. So all these three are important. But even if all these three are there, but finally the main fountainhead, the living force is not there, then all three are useless. So all these four aspects are actually required, and these are generated from Mahavishnu. Okay. And particularly that pranaha is referred separately to those three because it is actually stressing the importance of the pranaha, right? So Divyanita Mata, you're referring to that chart, right? The Karanaksha Vishnu. So there we read ahankar, and we read ahankar in mode of ignorance, tamaha, and then we continue. But ahankar in mode of passion is actually this pranaha or sutra, right? So we are reading the same chapter. Okay, 16.
Manu pranati yam prana pranantam sarvajantashu apanantam apananti naradevam ivanudaha. As the followers of a king follow their lord, similarly, when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move. And when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities.
So basically here, the point is again made that how we are dependent completely on the energy of the Supreme Purusha. And this is elaborated with an example. Like I was thinking about like how you've seen Prabhupada on the morning walk, right? So all the disciples are following Prabhupada. As soon as Prabhupada walks, he puts the cane down, everyone stops. And then Prabhupada starts walking, and everyone starts walking. So similarly, it is when the energy of the Lord is there, then all the living entities function, they move. But as soon as the energy stops, everything stops. And this shows how all of us are completely dependent on that one sutra, on that one Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anu pranati means following living symptoms, that following that pranaha or the sutra that was actually explained in the previous verse. Pranaha pranantam sarva jantushu. Sarva jantushu, all the living entities, their pranaha, their senses become active when this life air, which we read in the previous verse, the pranaha is actually emanated from that Mahavishnu. If the prana stops, then all the living entities, they stop. Apananti, all stop. And just like a servants follow the king. So Prabhupada in the purport gives an example. He says, just like you consider an electric lamp, right? The lamp is dependent on what? Electricity. Electricity is dependent on what? The electric generator, the powerhouse. The powerhouse is dependent on what? The reservoir of water. The reservoir of water is dependent on what? The clouds. The clouds are dependent on what? The sun. The sun is dependent on what? The creation. The creation is dependent on what? The Supreme Personality of God, Mahavishnu. So without Mahavishnu, even this, the light bulb you're seeing here, it will not function. So that's why Prabhupada says that everything you see, the ultimate cause of everything is Mahavishnu. Or finally, we go back, it's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But here in this section of Sarga, we are saying without Mahavishnu's generating this pranaha or the sutra, nothing will function. Everything stops. Okay. 17.
Prabhuji, sorry, I have a question, Prabhuji. So like here it's like the Lord's energy is working through everything. So is there a karma also involved in this? Because like we have seen the sunrise is on the time, moon is doing all this. So it's functions of Lord's desire or through his energy. Like when we see the like the cyclones and all the Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik things are there. So these are it's a reason for the Jiva's karma, or it's like it works as it is, and whoever comes in the contact and they get result of that.
So your question is, let's say there is a hurricane.
Yes. True.
Now, is that hurricane because of the Jiva's karma, or is finally the Mahavishnu is the cause of it? Is that a
Yes. True. Yes. True.
Okay, so it's both actually. Right? Is it because of the Jiva's karma that we are actually getting some reaction? But who is creating the reaction? That reaction is actually finally given by the laws created by the lawmaker who is actually making everything happen. Like later on, we'll read this point that the what control do we have? Let's say I want to lift a pen. Right. The only thing that we control is the thought. That I had the desire and I said like, oh, I want to do this. That's the only thing we have. Even the act of lifting this pen is actually, I don't have control over it. It is only when the demigods, the controlling demigods, actually see, or first of all, the Paramatma sees the desire in the heart, then he actually controls the controlling demigods, and the controlling demigods control my hand and lift it up, and hence I lift my pen. The only thing that the jiva actually does is actually thinking. That's it. And the Paramatma is doing everything. So coming back to your question, that yes, everything that we see, oh, there's a hurricane coming. It is all, yes, because of the Jiva has done, like all the living entities have done sinful activities, hence they are facing the Adi Daivik miseries. But who is controlling all this? Who is the cause of all causes? It is going back to Krishna himself. But that does not make Krishna responsible for all this. He's causing everything based on what we are doing. But he's not responsible. Right? 4th chapter, he clearly said, no. You cannot blame Krishna for all this. The blame comes back to us, but he's making everything happen. So he's a cause of all cause. Yes, Mataji.
So, Prabhu, here you're saying that the prana is being also coming from the sense energy, mental force, bodily strength, and the prana, right? Coming from Mahavishnu. But the previous verse back we had the Hiranyagarbha, which is the sum total of all living entities, right? That is the prana of all living entities, like Atmas, right?
But actually, there's a difference between Atma and Prana. Prana is actually said to be the life air. And
okay.
Atma is the soul.
Life air.
Atma resides in the life air. When the life air stops, then the jiva, the soul leaves the body.
So in Hiranyamaya, is just the prana there or the atmas there?
Just the sum total of all jivas, just the atmas. So that's why the prana is defined as a separate thing. So even in our body, the soul is there. The soul has nothing to do with this material world. But as long as the prana, the life airs are there, then the soul is actually functioning. But as long as the life airs leave, then the soul actually goes. The body stops functioning. So it's two separate, the prana and the atma. Right? And the prana, then you have different kinds of pranas and so on. The 10 kinds of airs are defined, right? Prana, apana, vayu, etc.
They're all coming from Mahavishnu. No.
Yeah, I mean, finally, yes, everything is coming from Mahavishnu. Actually, we'll come to that also in the next section when we read. That is this aspect that is actually explained in text number 28. Apana, prana, vayu, everything how it is actually coming from Mahavishnu. Text 28 of this chapter.
So basically, at this point, it's a sum total of all pranas, right? Mahavishnu has.
Right now, it is sum total of all pranas. Okay, text 17. Next. Okay, go ahead.
Pranenakshipata kshutrid antarajayate viboho pipasato jakshatascha pranukam niravidyata.
The living force being agitated by the Virat Purusha generated hunger and thirst, and when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened.
So now from 17 all the way to text number 30, we'll be reading that how the Lord desired something, and because of the Lord desire, the gross sense organ, the subtle sense organ, the sense devata, and the sense object, all these four get manifested. Right? So everyone got these four? So in this verse, what does it say? Pranina, by the living force, akshipata, being agitated. Then Shutta and Trit. Shutta means hunger and Trit means thirst. So the Lord himself felt thirsty and hungry. Then Antara, from within, he actually jayate, he generates. So the Lord himself, Vibhuhu, the Lord, there Vibhuhu. So now we are actually referring to the universal form, which is actually manifested in the Garbhodaksha Vishnu. When the Lord, this universal form, he actually felt the desire of hunger and thirst. Then from within, he actually generated Pipa Sataha. He desired something to actually quench the thirst, and Jakshataha, he actually desired something to take away the hunger, right? And then Mukham at first was actually open. So first function that actually happens is the mouth is actually generated. And Prabhupada says, even when the baby develops in the womb, which is the first organ that the baby develops? The mouth. So how the baby develops in the womb of the mother, we should say other way around. How the Lord desires the different functions of the different organs, similarly the baby in the womb, he actually develops the different organs. So first thing is what? The mouth. Right? So it clearly says prak. Prak means at first the Lord opened the mouth. Right? And then the next verse will actually talk about the different elements that actually come with this. And then Prabhupada in his purport, he actually says, see, this proves the point that even for our eating, even for our drinking, the Lord has to first of all desire. And as soon as we talk of desire, can that entity be impersonal? It cannot be impersonal. It has to be a person. Only when a person desires, then all these things are being manifested. That proves that the Lord is actually a person. Okay. And here it says, because he has the sum total of all the mouths, the individual living entities have mouths. So this is similar to all the, like from here, text 17, all the way to text 30, when the Lord is manifesting all these different sense organs. It is because that's the sum total of all the organs, and because the Lord desired all those, we have those things. We have mouth, we have tongue, we have eyes, we have ears, and so on. But it's all from the desire of the Lord. But what is the first desire? First desire is the desire to satisfy, to quench the thirst and to eat. And then, like when the baby comes out, when baby is born, right? What is the first thing? It cries. And then first desire is to drink or eat. So that's the first desire. So we see how the generation of the jiva in every body, every lifetime, follows the pattern of the desires of the universal form. Okay, next. So now we'll just follow the entire sequence. So for now, from this verse up to 30, it is all these. And every time you have to find the four different things. What is the desire? We start off with the desire. Then because of desire, four things are mentioned. The gross sense organ, the subtle sense organ, then the sense devata or the controlling deity, and then what is the, finally, is the sense object. Right? So these four we have to follow. So we can look at the Subodhini. It actually gives this explanation. So let's continue with text 18 because 17 and 18 are related, and then I will show you in Subodhini this entire chart. Go ahead, next.
Do we read the Sanskrit or just in the no?
We didn't do the.
I mean, should we just continue with all English translations or do we continue?
Oh yeah, we do the Sanskrit. Let's do the Sanskrit.
Mukatastal nirbinam jiva tatropajayate tato nanaraso jagye jivayayo digamyate.
Just looking at the Sanskrit, what do you say? Mukhatas. So previously, what did we read? The mouth. From mukha, what came? Talu. Anyone knows talu? The palate, right? And then from the palate, what come? Jiva. Jiva, the tongue. Right? So you see the Sanskrit, you can follow along. And then it says upajayate. And once the tongue is manifested, then nana rasaha. Various tastes are actually manifested. Right? So
Translation, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. From the mouth, the palate became manifested. Thereupon, the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. Hare Krishna.
okay, so let me share my screen. You can see. I think everyone has Subodhini, but oh. Okay, so you see here, so Virat, first is the Virat Purupa's desire to eat or speak. So that is the first thing. And then because of that, there is a gross sense organ, which is the Adi Bhuta. The subtle sense organ, which is the Adhyatma. So this is like basically following Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation. And then the sense Devata, which is Adi Daiva. And then because of that, there is the Tanmatra, Adi Bhuta, and the bodily activity. Right? So both the sense organ and the Tanmatra is in Adi Bhuta. Right? So this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. But what does Prabhupada say? He says the gross sense organ and the subtle sense organ is in Adi Bhuta. Right? And he says Tanmatra is Adhyatma. Oh no, he actually says the person experiencing this is Adhyatma and the Devata, Adi Deva is both common. Right? So this is the chart that goes on. So some of these numbers are off. I mean, it does not go in the right order. I don't know if there's a reason for that, but so if you see text number 17 and 18 right here, to drink and eat, right? So talu is the tongue, jiva, right? Then Varuna is the deity controlling it, and what is happening? Nana raso, right? All the different tastes, and the water element is generated. Okay, so Prabhupada in the purport talks about that how in 18 he says that yes, though the controlling deity, the Adi Daiva, is not mentioned, but as soon as we talk about these elements, there has to be a controlling deity. So that is already implied in this explanation, and hence that is the Adi Deva. And who is the deity controlling all this tongue and relishable juices? That is Varuna. So therefore, the mouth becomes a resting place for the tongue, which tastes. So this is another aspect that we see in all these verses, that there is the sense organ, and that is the place where the subtle sense organ is present. So the gross sense organ is the mouth, and the place where the tongue is actually located is the gross sense organ, and the tongue is the subtle sense organ. Varuna is generated, and okay. So the four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles: Adhyatma, Adideva, Adibhuta. What are the four main principles here? The four principles. Go ahead.
The gross sense organ, the subtle sense organ, the sense devata, and the sense object.
So these four. And these four are classified into Adhyatma, Adideva, and Adibhuta. Okay. So we can keep going actually. Should we take a break? Or because next is like we'll just keep going up to like 30. We'll just go on through all this. What is desire? What is sense organ, sense object, and this. So maybe we can take a quick break and come back, and then we'll just continue this. So at least up to like, let's see, up to text 35, we can complete the aspect of sarga, and then remaining visarga is just the final. That's easy actually. That's not so much to explain. Okay. Okay, so please take a break, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, continue. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone. So let's continue. So we're going a little fast through this section. Okay, so text number 19. So let's just do the English so that we can just continue on the section. So actually, let me see. Maybe we continue Sanskrit because it's nice to see the keywords also. So we'll do Sanskrit and English. So let's continue. Text 19.
Vivakshor mukato bhumno vanir vagvyaritam tayoho jale chaitasya shuchiram niroda samajayata.
When the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. He was lying in the water. All these functions remained suspended.
So after the desire to eat and drink, then when there's mouth, then what do you want to do? You want to speak, right? So then there's a desire of speaking. So when the Lord had a desire of speaking, then it says Vani, the controlling deity is that of fire, and then Vak. Vak means the words or vibration, right? So the vibration was created, and Vyahartam is the speeches. So that's the first part of the verse. And Jale Chaitasya Suchiram. Suchiram means for a very long time. So as long as the Lord was sleeping, all these functions were actually suspended. It's only when the Lord woke up, then the desire came, then all these activities started. Now, Prabhupada in the purport, he's making the point that how all the activities of the sense organs, they are actually controlled by the will of the Lord. We made the point that because the Lord desired, and hence we actually got so the Lord's mouth is the sum total of all the mouths. The Lord desired, and hence we actually have this. So that means what? These senses are actually given to each one of us, like the sense was speaking, like the mouth is actually offering a license for the conditioned souls who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. So basically, here the organ is actually given us to use for a particular purpose. And hence you have a controlling deity, and the controlling deity is controlled by the Lord. So the organ is meant to be used for the service of the Lord. When we don't use the organ for the service, for what is created, then the controlling deity will actually say, I gave him this sense organ for speaking about Krishna, but he's using it for mundane topics. Hence, I will take it away and I will give him a different sense organ. Right? And then based on the control of that controlling demigod, then he actually gets maybe a mouth of another animal where that is only used for barking, so to say, right? Or like a frog's mouth, but it's just like croaking. It's not used for glorification of the Lord. So the demigod says, why to give him a nice mouth where he can chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna? He's not using it for that purpose, so it's actually promoted to the lower species. So we should always be conscious that these sense organs are given for a particular purpose, and the controlling deity, who is actually controlled by the Lord, is there for a particular purpose. And as soon as we forget it and use it, for a purpose for which it's not created, then the demigod will take it away and give us a different sense organ. Right? So Prabhupada talks about the mouth, and he actually says that both the tongue is there, the taste, right? So human beings and then the pigs, right? Their tasting power is not on the same level. Prabhupada says human beings and swine. The swines can eat anything, but if the human beings, they eat anything, right? Like how they say, they make this point. Sometimes human beings, they eat everything that flies except an airplane, everything that's in water except a submarine. And if there is no discrimination or eating, then it will just say, okay, you want to eat stool? Here, I'll give you the body of a pig. So we should understand this entire, so that's the point. And then Prabhupada concludes this purport and says, an irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all Shastras. Human life means what? Means a life of responsibility. Not just doing whatever whimsically comes to my mind and says, oh, I want to eat this, I eat this, or do this. That's a very irresponsible life. And if someone is living that irresponsible life of indiscrimination, very risky. Why? That means that life will be taken away and given a lower species. So do not take that risk. That's the point of purpose. Okay. Next, text 20. So we had the desire to eat, to drink. The Lord had desire to eat, drink, and then speak. And based on that, the corresponding organs have come. Right? So text 20.
Nasike nirabidyetam dodu yati nabhasvati tatra vayurgana vaho grano nasi jigrikshataha. Gopinath, right there.
Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respirations were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested.
Nasike. What is Nasike? We refer to nose. So you see how the word nose is coming from the original Sanskrit. Nasike. Nasike, nirabhityetam, being developed. Then rapidly blowing. So the air of respiration, Nabhasvati, was rapidly blowing. And then what happened? The two nostrils were actually created. Right? Vayu Gandha, and the smelling odor was the function there, and Grahana, the sense of smell, and nose, yeah, desiring to smell odors. Right? So after the desire to speak, then there was this entire desire to smell odors and the desire to breathe. So both these aspects are here. Okay, so Prabhupada is actually making the point in the purport. He actually says everything is first desired by the Supreme before the subordinate living entity can act upon it. Because the Lord desired to smell fragrance, because of that, the living entities have the capability to smell odor, right? And then hence Prabhupada makes the point, the living entity can see only when the Lord sees. The living entity can smell only when the Lord smells, right? And this proves the point. What is the entire theme, underlying theme of this entire section?
No independence.
That the living entities are completely dependent on the Lord. Even our smelling, our eating, our drinking, our hearing, everything is dependent on the Lord. If the Lord does not give us all these organs, does not give us this capability, what can the jiva do? Hence, we are completely dependent on the Lord. So hence Prabhupada makes this point. The subject of absolute dependence of the living entity and absolute independence of the Lord is proved by this section. Okay. 21.
Yadatmani niralokam atmanam chadidrikshataha nirbine yakshini tasya jyotish chakshur gunagraha. Divinity.
Thus, when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see himself and all that was created. Then the eyes, the illuminating sun god, the power of vision, and the object of sight all become manifested.
So we should, as I said, as a baby develops in the womb, they follow that desire of the Lord has. So even if you see the organs in the baby, it actually develops a mouth, then the speech, right? First is hunger and thirst, then speech, and then smell, right? The breathing, and then now we have what? The eyes. Yeah. So it says Nira Lokam, Nira Alokam. So basically, when there was no light, then the Lord desired, oh, I want to see this material creation. I want to see myself and this entire material creation. Atmanam, I want to see my own transcendental body, and Cha, on the other bodily forms. Didikshataha, he desired to see. Then what happens? Akshini. Akshini is the eyes. Jyoti, the sun god, right? Without the sun god, we made this point. They're all related. Without the sun, there's no vision to, no meaning to our eyesight. So Akshini eyes, Jyoti sun, Chakshu eyes, and Guna Granati, the power of sight. Right? So all this was actually generated. Right. So Prabhupada makes the point, the universe by nature is dense darkness. It is only because of the presence of the sun that we can actually see anything. If there was no sun, dense darkness, you couldn't see anything. The entire eyesight and the eyes were actually useless. So the whole phenomenal world became visible only after the presence of the sun. Okay, 22.
Bodhyamanasya rishibhir atmanastat jigrikshataha karno cha nirabhidyetam disha shrotram gunagraha.
By development of the desire of the great sages to know, the ears, the power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self.
So when this Virat Rupa, he desired to understand himself, right? He wants to understand himself. What is his form? Then the which is actually revealed by the Vedic sound. Then the two gross ears. And what are the controlling deity of the ears? The direction. The direction devatas. They are there, and the subtle ear organ, and then the sound. It actually all appear. Okay. Right. So these four are there. Prabhupada in the purport, he actually says, he makes the point that advancement of knowledge, Like as the organs are developing, the advancement of knowledge means to actually understand the Supreme Lord. So knowledge, that is first of all the physical knowledge, where there's laws of the nature, but without the spiritual knowledge, that knowledge is not complete. So advanced knowledge means to understand who we are, right? Understand who we are and what is our duty here, right? That is real advancement of knowledge, not just the external faculties. Right? Okay, and then Prabhupada says, so what is the purpose of years here? To understand oneself. We're talking of the years, right? The years are meant to understand. And hence, when we actually hear, we should hear about the Supreme Personality of God, about Atma Tattva. And by that hearing, we can understand who we are. So the years are connected with the aspect of knowledge, right? So, like Prabhupada talks, we are eager to hear through radio, television, and we hear about other planets, things taking place far away from them on other planets, but we should know the power of hearing and the instrument for hearing were given by the Lord for hearing about the Lord. Right? That's the beginning of oral reception. So when we actually say, how does our spiritual life start? When there is the hearing, the sound vibration, and the shravana. That's the first aspect. Right? So yes. Okay, next.
Vastuno mridu katinya lagu gurvoshna shitanam jigshatastvam nirbhina tasyam roma mahiruha tatra chantar bahirvatas tvacha labdha gunovritaha. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body, and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception became prominent.
Right. So when after that desire, before this was a desire to understand himself, so years were generated. Now the Lord desired to experience, and it actually says mridu katinya. Mridu means soft and hard, right? Whether the object is soft or hard, whether it is light or heavy. Guru means what? Heavy, right? So you see the word guru. Guru means heaviness. Lagu means lightness, whether it is light or heavy. So if you want to see an object, is this light or is this heavy? You will actually use your hand and your skin and you see, oh yeah, that's the weight. Is it soft or hard? You can actually touch it. Right? So it is through the skin that you are actually experiencing the hardness and softness or the lightness and the heaviness. And then the next one is Ushna and Sitana. Is this cold or is this hot? Right? Again, you are using a skin. So for all these functionalities, then Twak, the touch sensation is there, and Tasyam, the skin, and the skin means there's the hairs on the body, right? This is sense perception, the hairs on the body. And then who is the controlling deity? Mahiruha. The trees are the controlling deities. The trees are the controlling deities. And Vata Tvacha, the sense of touch or skin. Yeah. So Gunaha and then sense perception is actually generated. So Prabhupada explains that this aspect of the touch, there are two things. One is the hair that's actually the actual touch sensation, and also the aspect of itching. That's all. Yeah, external itching and touch sensation. It is all by this aspect of the hair on the skin. Okay, now Prabhupada makes a very interesting point in purport. He actually says that the sense perception is also a source of knowledge. So when we are actually touching things, we are getting knowledge of it. But the knowledge of the self can expand to a knowledge of the phenomena, but the physical knowledge cannot lead to knowledge of the self. What does this mean? That now we are reading what? Bhagavatam. And through Bhagavatam, we are actually understanding the desire of the Lord. And from the desire of the Lord, we are actually understanding how the different skin is working, what are the different sense perception. So by that spiritual knowledge, we are getting phenomenal knowledge. But if one just focuses on phenomenal knowledge, he will not get the spiritual knowledge. So the real way of studying is first you actually understand the spiritual knowledge, and then through the spiritual knowledge, you will actually get knowledge of the phenomenal world. That is the right way of understanding knowledge. Right? So Prabhupada makes the point. Okay, next one, text number 24.
Pastoruruhatustasya nana karma chikirshaya tayostu balavanendra adanam upayashrayam.
Thereafter, when the Supreme Person desired to perform varieties of work, the two hands and their controlling strength, and Indra, the demigod in heaven, became manifested, as also the acts depends on both the hands and the demigod.
So basically, what is the next aspect here? Hasto. Hasto means the hands. And what is the desire here? Desire is nana karma. So when the Lord desired to do different kinds of work, then the hands were actually manifested. And Balavan, the strength. And who is the controlling deity? Indra. Indra, the demigod in heaven, is the controlling deity. And Adhanam, the activities of the hand, is dependent on both the demigod and the hand himself. So the activity here, the sense object, is actually dependent on both the Balam and the Hastam. Oh, sorry, the Indra and the Hastam. Right? Hastam means Balam. So hands and the controlling demigod. So Prabhupada in this purport, again stresses on the point that the Lord is known as the Lord of the senses. Rishikesha, right? Rishikesha, right? The Lord of the senses. So here basically again we are reading all the senses are coming from whom? The Lord. And what is the purpose of all the senses? To be engaged in the service of the Lord. Right? So no one therefore can claim any proprietorship of the senses. We cannot say this is my eyes, my ears. It all belongs to the Lord. Hence is actually used in the service of the Lord. Right? So the living entity is controlled by the senses are controlled by demigods are controlled by the Lord, right? And who has created this entire arrangement that the senses are, we are controlled by our senses by demigods by the Lord. Like who has created all this? The Lord himself. But what is the purpose? So that the living entities can use the senses in the service of the Lord. So we don't have any independence, right? The whole thing is controlled ultimately by the Supreme Lord, and there is no independence either of the material nature or of the living entity. And as long as the living entity thinks, I am the controller, my eyes, my sight, I can do anything I want, as long as we are puffed up, we'll be under the illusion. But when we wake up, then we understand, yes, my eyes are meant to have darshan of Shri Radha Golokananda, Shri Gaurnitai, Srila Prabhupada. Right? So that's the point Prabhupada says. Next 25.
Yatim jigishata pado guru hate bika nikam padbyam yagya swayam havyam karma bhi kriyate nribihi.
Translation. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thereupon, because of his desiring to control movement, his legs became manifested. And from the legs, the controlling deity named Vishnu was generated. By his personal supervision of this act, all varieties of human beings are busily engaged in dutiful occupational sacrifice. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Gatim. Next is the desire to move. Right? So as soon as the desire to move, then what? The legs are actually generated. Pado, right? Pado became generated. And then Padyam from the legs, Yagya. And who is the controlling deity of the legs? Yagya, Lord Vishnu himself. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elaborates that this personality called Yagya is directly empowered by Vishnu himself. Right? And hence, like Prabhupada makes a point in purport that he says, for performing any kind of occupational duties, the leg is the most important instrument of the body. Because without the legs, how will you go to do anything? Right? So legs are the most important instrument of the body. Without the help of the legs, one cannot move from one place to another. And therefore, Lord Vishnu himself empowers Yagya to be the controlling deity for the legs. Okay. And by his personal supervision supervision of this act, all varieties of human beings are engaged in or karma bihi, on one's occupational duty. Right? So the Lord Swayam is actually the controlling deity here. And Prabhupada in the purpose says how every human being is engaged in so many different occupational duties. They either travel from one place to another place in a city, or sometimes they travel between cities, all just to with the motivation that yes, if I do this work, I will get well, and by that wealth, I'll become comfortable. But is that what is actually really making us comfortable? It's basically we are just following the world, and world says unless you have money, unless you earn like unless you work so hard like a donkey and earn enough money, you will not be comfortable. And that's what the world tells us, and we tend to follow. And devotees, at least we have better knowledge than that, but the world, people tend to follow this, and they don't know what will actually really give me comfort of life. Right? They don't know how to make the activities purposeful to fulfill the mission of human life. Right? They're captivated by the external energy of the Lord and completely forgotten Lord Vishnu, what is the real purpose of life, and they think that this life is all in all, and the highest amount of sense gratification I can get in this life, I am successful. More money to enjoy, that means I'm successful, but that is not the case. Right? The secret is that every step they should try to execute sacrifices towards the path of world peace. So Prabhupada in the purport goes at Bhagavad Gita 18:45 and 46. Swe swe karmanya abhirata samsiddhim labate naraha. So what does Krishna say in these two verses? Oh Arjuna, I will tell you how by performing occupational duties you can actually attain samsiddhim. You can actually attain the highest perfection. And how is that? Yata pravriti bhutani yena sarvam idam tatam. Swakarma tab abhicharya. You should actually worship the Lord by your work, and you should offer the results to Him. Do it as a sacrifice. And by that, by performing your work, you can actually attain the highest perfection. Right? So that is the real thing about working. So work in such a way that it is actually a sacrifice for Vishnu. Right? So one should make it a point in his life to know perfectly that he is not independent absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Is everyone okay? Continue. It is kind of straightforward. Like we have to find the four objects, as I said, the desire, then subtle sense organ, gross sense organ, then the controlling deity, and the sense object.
In Subodhini, this particular one, the Devata is mentioned as Upendra, at least in the version I have. Whereas Yagya, is there a difference?
I mean, Upendra is another name for Vamana Dev, right?
Yeah.
So that is again Yagya Vishnu, right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is actually referring this because the Sanskrit word there is Yagya. So he actually says that personality is directly empowered by Vishnu himself. And then the verse actually says Swayam Vishnu. So Upendra, another name. But I know why the word Upendra is actually used. It could be from Jiva Goswami's commentary. I'll have to see that.
Prabhuji, when we put the tilak and we on the left side and we say Vaman Dev, then it was written in the explanation that whenever you're walking, you can think about Vaman Dev. So here the legs are there, so maybe that's fine.
Okay, that's a good point. That's how Vaman Dev, he took the 3 steps of land, so that's why the name Upendra. That's a very good point. Okay.
In a Ramaraksha Stotra, the all in the different parts of the body. I mean, in the like Narayan Kavach. So all these like part of the body, the demigods take care for that.
What do you say? The demigods are controlling different parts of the body?
No, the demigod, actually our senses is controlling the demigod, right?
Our senses
But
are controlled by the demigods, yes.
Yes, by the demigod. And the demigod is controlled by the Lord. That
Yes.
is the main thing.
Yes.
But in you know, we have we have different like Ram Raksha Stotra and Narayan Kvachas, and everything is there in, let's say, the different part of the body who is taking care of that one,
Right.
like that. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So let's continue. 26.
Nirabidyata Shishno Vai Prajanandamritartinaha Upasta Asit Kamanam Priyam Tad Upayashrayam.
Thereupon, for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring and tasting heavenly nectar, the Lord developed the genitals, and thus there is the genital organ and its controlling deity, the Prajapati. The object of sexual pleasure and the controlling deity are under the control of the genitals of the Lord.
So if you see the interesting thing, like the word Ashraya is used, and the whole theme here is to prove that the Lord is the Ashraya. So here it says that both Kamanam and right, so it actually says both the object of sexual pleasure, Kamanam, and the controlling deity, the Prajapati, they are both under the control, the Ashraya of the genitals of the Lord. Right, so in that way, the Lord is the Ashraya. Right? So Prabhupada here, and then it says thereupon, so the next desire is a desire for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring, and tasting heavenly nectar. So Prabhupada says the heavenly pleasure for the conditioned soul is sexual pleasure, and this pleasure is tasted by the genitals. So Prabhupada is talking about that, and Prajapati is the the controlling demigod. So Prabhupada here in this purport, he says that, unless there is this pleasure of sexual union, why would anyone actually create children? Because creating children means sacrifice, where you have to like maintain them, take care of them, raise them. But unless this sexual pleasure was there, then why would anyone create? And the entire purpose of this material world is to give the living entities an opportunity to come into this world and try to fulfill their desire and hopefully turn to Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead. So unless there is an aspect of creation, then the purpose, unless there is an aspect of creating children, what is the purpose of creation is actually lost. And hence here, the Lord has given this aspect of pleasure in the act of sex, so that by that pleasure, children are created, and so on. Right? And then the purpose of creation is actually continued. So sexual pleasure is the impetus for the action. But Prabhupada is making the main point here. Now he actually says, but one can serve the Lord with the act of sexual pleasure. Right? And he says, as soon as the children are actually properly trained in God consciousness, then this entire act becomes a service to the Lord. And he says, Prabhupada is making the point in purport that one can actually beget hundreds of children and enjoy the celestial pleasure of that sexual union so many times. But as long as all those children are raised in Krishna consciousness, then that is actually acceptable. That's all good. And all that is actually a service to the Lord. And otherwise, again, Prabhupada here, in the previous purport, he compared the man and pigs. So even here he compared that if it is the only purpose of sex was to create children, then the pigs are better than us because they produce 12 piglets at one time. And we actually only produce one. So the point is, yes, sexual union to beget children, but to actually raise children in God consciousness. That is the key point. And if that is done, then that is the then this whole act becomes a service of the Lord. And what are we reading here? Is actually everything is under the control of the genitals of the Lord. So when we do this whole act, we are as a sacrifice or to raise Krishna conscious children, then the whole thing is actually giving pleasure to the Lord himself. 27.
Utsishur dhatu malam nirabidyata vaigudam tatapayus tato mitra utsarga upayashrayaha.
Thereafter, when he desired to evacuate the refuse of eatables, the evacuating whole anus and the sensory organ thereof developed along with the controlling deity Mitra. The sensory organ and the evacuating substance are both under the shelter of the controlling deity.
Prabhupada's purpose is one line purpose. The Prabhupada said, so the point here is like the universal form, the universal Virat Rupa, he desired to expel waste products. And then the gross anus appeared, right? And the sense organ is called anus, the Devata is the Mitra. And then what's the point made? That the sense object expulsion is dependent on both the anus and Mitra. So what does Prabhupada say? He said like even the task of evacuating is dependent on the organ and the demigod controlling. And the foolish jivas actually have the audacity to say that no, we are actually independent. There was this one incident I heard about I forget, like I have a vague memory of this. I heard this long time back about, in the class, like, someone was saying, no, I am the controller, I am independent. Why are you saying that we are dependent on God? And the speaker actually said, you cannot even, like, if you have the urge to go to the bathroom and I say, no, just stay here. You cannot even control that urge. You're so dependent. And now you claim to be God. You claim to be like independent, So we are so dependent, so dependent on everything. And hence we should actually understand how we are so dependent and declare our dependence on the Supreme Personality of God. Okay, 28.
Ashishripsho purapurya nabhidvaram apantaha tatrapanastato mrityur kritatvam upayashrayam.
Thereafter, when he desired to move from one body to another, the navel and the air of departure and death were combinedly created. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force.
What is the desire here? Ashrip soho, desiring to go everywhere, and puraha, in different bodies. When the Lord was desiring to go in different bodies, then the nabhi dwaram is like a gate, the navel or the abdominal hole was actually manifested. And then with that, the apana and actually even the prana. So both of them actually come, though prana is not mentioned in this point as a Sanskrit, but both the apana and prana actually get manifested in the navel. And the sense organ apana, the devata mrityu, and the sense object death, which takes shelter of the devata and sense organ, they actually arose. So how does this work? And basically Prabhupada explains this point in the purport, that the pranavayu, it continues the life, but it's the apan vayu which stops the living force, right? So when the time for the jiva in a particular body is over, then the apana vayu, it actually stops the pran vayu, and then this all happening in the navel, right? So if you see, our birth also is actually when you have the umbilical cord from the navel to the mother. So that's when the prana vayu is actually entering into the body, and that's how the life. But when we leave, that is the apan vayu, which is also in the navel. That's also, the navel is actually said to be the source where the movement from one body to another is actually happening. So very interesting. So Prabhupada says the same principle is followed even in the birth of an ordinary body. The body of a child develops from the body of the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint. That is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself as separated many. Right? So he desired to move from one place to other, and navel and air of departure and death combined. And the controlling demigod is Mrityu. Okay. Are there any comments here? I'm going fast, but text 29. Let's go.
Vitur anapananam asan kukshantar nadhayaha nadya samudraschatayos tushti pushti tad ashraye.
When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the sources of their sustenance and metabolism.
So initially, when there was a desire to drink and eat, then the mouth and tongue was manifested. But now the desire to actually, when he wants to eat something, then there has to be the digestion, right? So when you use to form a desire to take the food and drink, then the abdomen and the intestine and the veins And what are the devatas controlling? The rivers and the oceans are the devatas controlling the intestine and the veins. And then their sense objects, that's basically food and liquid, they actually all appear. Right? And then Prabhupada in this purport actually says, the fulfillment of the body, with the fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, the body's health is dependent on the healthy actions of the intestine and the arteries. That is your biology class for today. The body's health is dependent on healthy actions of intestines and arteries. Okay. So that's that. Then text 30.
Nididyasur atmamayam virayam nirabhidyata tato manaschandra iti sankalpa kama evacha. When there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy, then the heart, the seat of the mind, the moon, determination, and all desire became manifested.
Now, this is very interesting. So now it's the mind, right? But it says the location of the mind. So if you see in all the previous things, it was giving the subtle sense organ, and the location of the subtle sense organs was the gross sense organ. Right? For tongue, it was what? Palate. So similarly here. So now the subtle sense organ is what? The mind. And what is the gross sense organ? The heart. So where is the mind present? Many times we say mind is in the brain, but the mind is actually present in the heart. So here it says, desiring to know. So when the Lord actually is desiring to think, right? Contemplate material objects and illusions, then the heart appears, and then that's the heart is the gross, and the subtle sense organ is the mind. And who is the controlling devata? The Chandra. Right? Chandra is the controlling devata. And then determination and desire arose. Determination and desire. Okay. So this is about the mind. So Prabhupada in the purport, he's talking about how he makes a very interesting point, that how in the heart, who is present? The Paramatma is present, right? And it is only when the Paramatma, when actually enters into the heart of a living entity, that's when the mind is actually manifested in the conditioned jiva. It is only when the Paramatma enters, that's when the mind is actually manifested in the heart. Right? Right. And therefore, the material mind of the living entity develops when the super soul sits on his heart, and after which the mind, the controlling deity, and the activities of mind, which is namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. So, activities of the mind cannot begin without the manifestation of the heart, and the heart becomes manifested when the Lord wants to see the activities of material creation. So, it's by the desire of the Lord wanting to see different things, wanting to contemplate different things, that's when the mind is actually manifested. Okay. So up to this 30 is we see these four sequences, for gross sense organ, subtle sense organ, sense devata, and the object. Okay. So the next few verses, anyway, let's just quickly, we'll come back to this, but let's just quickly go through these verses. Let's read the English, because up to 35, right, will actually complete this aspect of Sarga, and then next time we will go to Visarga. Right? Okay, please go ahead with translation 31.
The 7 elements of the body, namely the thin layer on the skin itself, the flesh, blood, fat, marrow, and bone, are all made of earth, water, and fire, whereas the life breath is produced by the sky, water, and air.
So here we read about the Virat Rupa and how the Virat Rupa, because of desire, all these different sense organs are being manifested. So basically, the sense organs are one way covering the Virat Rupa, right? So the 7 elements of the body, then the thin layer on the skin itself, the flesh, blood, fat, marrow, bone, all these are actually made of what? Earth, water, and fire. Right? So normally we say earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Right? But because we're talking of these gross elements, it focuses on earth, water, and fire. And we talk of prana, right? The life breath, that is produced for what? Sky, water, and air. What is a common element in both? water. And hence Prabhupada says, water is a common element in both gross and subtle forms of the creation. And it should be noted here that the water, being most prominent in the material creation, is the principal element of all these 5 elements. And then again, further, your class on biology and healthy living. So the pran is dependent on what? Sky, water, and air. And hence, for healthy life, what should one do? One should have open air, regular bath, and ample space. If you have these 3, then your pran will function properly and you can be healthy. Right? So breathing air of life is produced by sky, water, and air, and therefore open air, regular bath, and ample space in which to live are favorable for healthy vitality. So Bhagavatam, everything is there. If you want to become a what's that called? I'm forgetting this. Like a
Nutritionist?
huh?
Nutrition.
Yeah, maybe nutrition, or they have these people like they're like health. You go to them and they give like health advice. So you can just become one of those just by studying Bhagavatam. So open air, regular bath, ample space, and water is the most prominent. Right. So why is air and ether not mentioned? Because air and ether, they do not nourish the body through food, right? The remaining are actually, they nourish the body through food. So remaining 3 elements are mentioned. Okay, 32.
Translation, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The sense organs are attached to the modes of material nature, and the modes of material nature are products of the false ego. The mind is subjected to all kinds of material experiences, happiness and distress, and the intelligence is the feature of the mind's deliberation. Hare Krishna.
Right. So all these up to this point, we read about the senses. So all the senses, they naturally gravitate towards the sense object. Right. As soon as the eyes, where does the eyes go? It sees different object. It naturally gravitates towards the sense object. And then that's the first point. The second point, the sense objects, they appear attractive. Why? Because of the false ego. Because we actually think that, oh yes, I am the enjoyer, and if I have this thing to eat, then I will be happy, right? So that is the false ego, makes the sense objects to be attractive. So senses are naturally attracted to sense objects. Sense objects appear attractive because of the false ego, and then the mind actually stores all this. Oh, this pizza is so good. Ekadashi pizza. Oh, that is the best thing, right? So then this is all stored in the mind. Mind stores all these impressions. But then the main thing is what? The intelligence is the power of discrimination. So yes, natural sequence, the senses will go to sense objects. And the mind has all the impressions. It says, oh yeah, this is good, this is tasty, this is not tasty, and so on. But the intelligence has the power of deliberation. So hence Prabhupada makes a point in the purport that it is actually the intelligent person can actually understand that how this material nature is actually working, how the senses are attracted to sense objects, how it is all based on the sensations in the mind, and the intelligent person hence associates with sages and saints and nourishes himself with spiritual knowledge to actually empower that power of discrimination. Right? And Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, what does Krishna say? One should actually cultivate deliberate spiritual intelligence by studying these shastras. That's when we can actually break the cycle and get to the next stage of like nirodha and so on, mukti and so on. Okay, so let's just go ahead. 33, and maybe I'm going fast, but we'll come back to these verses. 33.
Thus, by all this, the personality of Godhead is covered by gross forms, such as those of planets, which were explained to you.
Right, so basically up to this, all this is covering over the Virat Rupa. That is all the gross covering. What is the subtle covering? Next verse.
Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation, and is distinct from the material conception.
Right. So the Virat Rupa, that gross external form that we have talked of so many times, is actually beyond that. The subtle form is who? The Lord Himself. The Lord Himself, who is transcendental manifestation, finer than the final, no beginning, no intermediate stage, no end. This is actually the Lord Himself. Right? The Lord, and beyond the limits of expressions of mental speculation and is distinct of material conception. So Prabhupada says this. Thus, the external feature or form of the Supreme is not the eternal form of the Lord, which has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Okay, the absolute truth is therefore beyond the expression and speculation of the material conception, and hence the word is used nirvisheshanam. Nirvisheshanam means without any without any material qualities or material variegated. That means that now the subtle form is the unmanifested, the transcendental, internal, beyond the conception of mind and body. And the last verse here, 35, is actually saying neither of the above forms, the material or the spirit or the subtle form, is accepted by the pure devotees. Why? Because they are interested only in who? Shyam Sundar Krishna, or four-handed Krishna. And the proof is what? Arjun. When he was shown the Vishwarupa, he saw the external form, but what was his desire? Oh Krishna, I have seen this entire Virat Rupa, but now, or Vishwarupa, now I am actually desiring to see your four-handed form and your original two-handed form. So pure devotees are only interested in the final original form of the Lord, not on all these external forms. That's the form they meditate on. Okay. I know I went fast through the last few verses, but this entire section is actually the Sarga aspect of creation. And then the last part of this chapter is the Visarga, secondary creation, that is from Brahma and the other living entities in this material world. Okay, so stop here. So next week we have a break, and the week after that is all the presentations, right? So in the week after that, you all will be doing the talking, I'll be doing the listening, so that'll be good for me. So and please time it to like around 10 to 12 minutes, right? So that everyone gets sufficient time. And I think everyone here has signed up. I think so. Yeah, okay. Okay, if you're not signed up, there's still a few chapters which are not covered. So you can cover those. Otherwise, I will just pitch in and just summarize those chapters. Okay, so stop here. Any final comments, realizations, any points from today's class, or any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. How we understand that the controlling deity for touch is trees, and also we talked about the controlling deities are rivers and seas for the digestion, because I thought that trees are the lower birth than humans.
Like, one way you can consider that how we say ocean, right? Ocean, who is the controlling deity of the ocean?
Moon god.
Right?
Moon god.
No. For the mind is Chandra.
Varuna. Varuna.
Varuna, right? Yeah, Varuna.
Okay.
So Varuna,
Right.
so if you actually consider that ocean, one way, if you consider ocean, then it is just like one material element. But you have a controlling deity for that. So all the trees also are actually personified by a personality. Like in the fourth canto, when you actually read this story of the Prachetas, right? So after they do their entire, tapasya, after they come out, then they see the entire earth is covered by trees, right? And then what they do? They start burning all the trees, right? And then who comes? I think Brahmaji comes, right? I think Brahmaji comes and tells the Prachetas, oh, not Brahmaji, Narad Muni, I think. Narada, right?
Naradji,
I think
Naradji.
Lord Shiva comes from.
No, that's before.
Because-
Before
No,
the
Naradji came, I think, Prabhuji.
Naradji, yeah. Narad Muni comes and what does he do? He actually gets the Prachetas married to the daughter of the trees. So it's not daughter of the trees as the lower consciousness, the one who are in lower consciousness. It is actually that personification of all the trees that has been referred there. So here also we are talking of the personification of all the trees, or the personification of all the rivers, or personification of all the oceans. That is the controlling deity. Narumani, yeah, I think the person comes. Okay. Any other comments or thoughts from today's class?
Prabhuji, I'd
So I
like
was
to
just
add-
wondering.
Right,
So
sorry. I was
just
sharing
like
that
you know how
realization that how jivas have are meant to enjoy in relation with Krishna.
Yeah, not as Krishna, not enjoy as the Lord, but enjoy with the Lord. Yes.
Mm.
Go ahead.
So you know how Prabhu, the whole sequence was that the starting from the mouth. You know how the whole creation starts from the mouth. I was just wondering how Rupa Goswami says in the first NOI, starts with the control of your mouth, tongue. Also, how Jivan Mukhe, Sevan Mukhe Jivado. So how important is to work on the mouth. That it's the Lord's first thing that comes to his mind is like mouth. Tongue.
Like that verse is actually good. Sevan Mukhe Jivado, Swayam Eva Spurutya. Sevan Mukhe Jiva. So where does Jiva say? They say like eating prasadam and chanting Hare Krishna. Right? So we start off by eating prasadam. And even that NOI, the first of Vacho Vegam, in the purport, it actually says, if you actually honor prasadam, then you can control your tongue. Right? So the eating aspect is that. That's the first thing. Thank you. And I think many of us, we come in Krishna consciousness and stay in Krishna consciousness because of the wonderful prasadam that we get in the festivals. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Yeah, so main thing is, I mean, I have to like study again this chapter in detail because you are going very fast. Another thing is like we have to totally depends upon God. We even 1 second we don't have to think about, even we have like a minute independence, but we don't have to think about that I am independent, I don't need anything, but we totally depends upon Lord Krishna.
Yeah, so this the entire section is proving that point of complete dependence of the living entity and complete independence.
Yes.
Yeah, I went fast, but if you read the purports also, even Vishnu Chakravarti,
Yes.
not
Yes,
so
I will.
plain. So if you read this, thank you. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll stop here.
Prabhuji, I like the point that, if you don't use the mouth for chanting Hare Krishna mantra or glorifying the Lord, he can take it away and make it only for barking, like you said, for the dog or the croaking of the frog. That was just very strong point. Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji. Yeah. That's like the entire theme here, that every organ we are getting is actually given by the mercy of the Lord. Hence, it should be used for the service of the Lord. Otherwise, if you misuse it, then you get a lower thing, lower organ. Thank you. Okay.
Prabhuji, I have a question, Prabhuji. So, like all these deities all the organs of the body is there, a particular deity is there. So, is it like when we offend them, that the body function stops or something like that?
Offended deity,
that particular deity. So, like whatever the organs are there. So, is it stopped, Prabhuji?
I mean,
well, not for devotees, because it's like it's like a tree. When we water the roots of the tree, it is nourished. So it is there for Krishna thing. But what about
point
the
here, like even eyesight, someone may say, right? So the controlling deity is Surya Dev. Right? So now, if you're not using your eyes for taking darshan of the Lord or serving the Lord, then it's not that the function is stopped, but the Surya Dev sees that, oh, he's not using it for the right purpose. So what he's using it, I will just give him that kind of eyesight. Maybe eyesight of fish or eyesight of the snake, So the demigod there, he knows that here are conditioned jivas and they may not use their organ for this. So based on that, they will keep de-promoting them to the organ what is actually being used for. But are we offending the demigods in that? I know that we are pleasing the demigods when we actually use our eyes for the service of the Lord, because the demigods know that, yes, they are using it for the right purpose. But I'm not sure whether we are offending the demigods. That's an interesting point. Yeah. Okay, so stop here.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have a quick question regarding the presentation. The Brahma Narada Samvada, that's what the topic I have chosen. It is spans to 2 chapters, right? So if I just, how do I do that? Because it should include both
Yes.
Narada's questions and Brahma's answer, right?
So let's talk separately, Mataji. So,
Okay, thank you. Okay.
and anyone, if you need help with your presentation, you can just message me and you can just do a quick call sometime.
Wonderful.
I'll kind of go over like, okay, this is a theme to focus and you have 12 minutes, so how to plan the presentation and so on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Always message.
Thank you for the class today.
Okay, so we'll end here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vancha
Jai.
Kalpataruvyasya, Kripa Sindhubhyo Patna Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo.
Navebhyo namo namah.
Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for your association. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.